Now we are going back to that breaking news story from Afghanistan. This afternoon, we heard from President Biden, who addressed the nation around 4 o'clock. He said the goal in Afghanistan was initially to prevent terrorism and not rebuild that country. The president said he stands squarely right now behind the decision to withdraw forces, admitting that this chaos there unfolded a lot faster than they had anticipated. Joining us live right now is Dr. Matthew Schmidt, Associate Professor of National Security at the University of New Haven. Thank you very much for joining us right now.
Good evening.
Let me ask you, are you surprised by what you're seeing there? I think a lot of people, as we said, even the president acknowledged, perhaps this is happening a little quicker than they thought. Do you feel the same way?
I'm not. And I think that the criticism directed at the intelligence community in some ways misunderstands what's happening. There are people in that community that said this could look exactly like you're seeing. There are people who said it could be somewhere in the middle. There are people who are saying that, it may take 6 or 9 months to happen. They have discussions. They sort of pick the number that they want to come at. But I used to teach military planners, and I promise you that people were planning for this kind of outcome. What you see there is an example of American professionalism that's bringing order to the chaos. This isn't a chaotic withdrawal. It's a withdrawal in the midst of chaos that can't fully be controlled. So there was no good time, as the president said, to do this.
Is this the right thing to happen right now, do you think?
It has to happen at some point. The war has to end. And what you see is a country that has struggled to achieve a kind of control, a kind of sense of itself that is stable for all the different peoples in Afghanistan. And I say peoples on purpose. Americans tend to think that there must be one kind of Afghan people, but most Afghans don't see themselves that way. They see themselves identifying with different regions, with different religious groups and things like this. And it's always been a place where bringing all those different identities together has been almost impossible. And in the end, that's really, what happens in these kinds of wars.
Dr. Schmidt, are we creating almost like a vacuum now where Afghanistan is going to be this terrible place where all these terrorists live and, kind of operate everything for around the world, what they're doing, who they're targeting?
Well, this is the irony that I think Joe Biden is trying to point out, which is difficult to do on TV. So let me try. The Taliban isn't necessarily our enemy. There's no indication that they plan on engaging in terrorist acts against the U.S. and its allies. We went into Afghanistan not because of the Taliban per se, but because of Al-Qaeda, which the Taliban decided to harbor. What you see here is a group of religious fanatics that are going to terrorize their population. But it's unclear that they become sort of a long-term enemy of America.
Very bad time, though, too, when you look at the folks who are there who've lived for 20 years with Americans in the country. We're talking about young men, women, particularly women, who potentially could be in a very bad way right now.
Yeah, you have a generation of girls and boys who were born and lived a life up to this point without the Taliban. They're 17, 18, 20 years old now. And there is a version of hell that is coming down upon them today. And you'll see those stories come out as reporters get access in the next days and weeks of, on the light end of things, women being forced to wear the burqa again, men being forced into military service at gunpoint. But you'll see torture and you'll see murder. And that's part and parcel of the Taliban's religious ideology. And it hasn't changed much because the person who bears the most blame, I would argue, is George W. Bush. In 2003, when he turned towards Iraq to fight a country that had no connection to 9/11, he left only 8,000 troops in Afghanistan. There are 6,000 troops in Afghanistan today. And there was a chance, there was an opportunity to keep the Taliban down. But we missed that opportunity, and over the last 15 years or so, they've had a chance to rebirth themselves into what we're seeing today.
Well, we appreciate your input this afternoon. Dr. Matthew Schmidt from the University of New Haven, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you.
Now, for updates, be sure to download the Channel 3 app. We will keep you posted with the latest developments on air and online.